welcome. I'm Stephen Sanders, one of the pastors at Oak Hill. I'm redoing this so that we have a recording, and we're going to just have a little family meeting. The genesis for this idea came out of our leadership team and realizing that can I see a show of hands, anybody who thinks it's been a crazy last few years? And so we wanted to give you an update where we are and share some things, but also have time for questions and conversation. So this is internal Oak Hill United Methodist stuff, all right? This is us as a congregation. So here's the format for this. We go to the next slide, please. I'm going to give some brief reflections on what I see and share that with you. Then we're going to have an update from Larry Kaiser. Larry chairs our finance committee, and I am so thankful he is part of this. And Dale Kilsby is our treasurer. He may have some things to be including in this too. And then we're going to share things with you, and then we're going to have a question and answer time. All right? And I'm going to be leading that question and answer time, but I'm going to give you time for those of you who are introverts in the room, I'm going to give you time to have conversation with one another about questions that you want to ask. And then we'll have you pose those questions to our leadership team, and we will respond to those as best as we can. And we are going to close with prayer and be done in 56 minutes. All right? Thank you all for coming. Will you join with me in a moment of prayer? O most holy and gracious God, you have created your church, and you have created this church called Oak Hill, which is part of your larger church. And we give thanks for this community and for the way that it has touched lives. Some of the lives in this room have been touched deeply, and others are new to this community and wondering what it's all about. I pray, O God, that you pour out your Holy Spirit upon us as individuals and us as a congregation, that we might live faithfully as your people in this congregation and be a beacon of light and love and hope to the world. We lift our prayers through Christ's most holy name, and all God's people say, all right, I said I'm going to do this in 5 minutes, so I need someone with a cell phone. Vicky, would you time me, please, and whistle really loudly when I hit my 5-minute mark, please? All right? I don't usually have notes in front of me, but there's just some stuff I want to share with you. And so I have pieces of paper, which just really blows my mind to have pieces of paper in front of me. Letting you know, I usually write down every word I'm going to say, though, including the goofy comments. So again, go back so people can see the format. Go back one slide, please. There we go. So I'm going to give you a brief update on what I see. We're going to have a financial update from Larry Kaiser, time of question and answer, and then end with prayer. We're recording this session. We will edit it down, and then I hope that it'll be ready to email out with the Cornerstone this week. Okay, so let me just give you some brief thoughts on what I'm seeing as a church, guys, all right? I came here during a weird season of life, and this church was completely shut down. The campus was closed, and all of worship was online. So to say that I did not have a normal transition into being a pastor here would be an understatement. Amen? Amen. All right, so I'm going to share some things about historical stuff in the church. I don't want to dwell on this, but I want you to see it. Would you throw up the graph, please? This graph is about a 10-year history, a 9-year history of worship attendance at Oak Hill. And I think it's important for you to see this. Oak Hill went through a season of significant decline in worship attendance. That's one of the key indicators for me of health of a congregation. You will never hear me talking about membership numbers because they're not important, but worship attendance patterns are important. And in the 5 years before COVID, worship attendance at Oak Hill decreased by 55%. Within simply the 14 months before COVID, so that same 55% decrease, but within the 14 months before COVID, worship attendance at Oak Hill decreased by 35%. All right? So this church went from having over 600 people in worship every week to having 300 people in worship every week. and then COVID hit. All right? So just know that. So that's the past. Let me show you what I've seen over the last period of time. Throw up the next slide, please. These are our worship. This is our worship pattern since January of 2022. And I know for those of you who weren't math majors and don't like reading graphs, what that shows to me is there has been a pretty consistent growth in worship attendance. This is both in person. The bottom line is in person. The upper line includes people on Facebook. We're still trying to learn how to count the numbers of people who are online and other things. But the key for me is that there has been a consistent growth in worship attendance and participation over the last 14 months. And so that is a key sign of health for me, that we are people both coming back and coming to Oak Hill for the first time. All right? So those are just some numbers. Larry's going to share you a little few more numbers. Last year, we went through a visioning process at Oak Hill, and we came and we had about 150 people participate in these conversations. Now, there were formal outputs of the visioning process. We came up with a mission statement, and we said that we exist to transform lives through experiencing and growing in love of God, others, and self. You have said this is why this church exists. And you came up with a vision statement. Would you just kind of follow along with me, Ann? And you came up with a vision statement, and it says that our vision is to be a diverse community united beyond our differences by the love of Christ, where everyone is welcome, everyone is connected, everyone is growing, and everyone is serving. That is the type of church you said that you belong to be. And a big part of that, I'm going to let you know, was that united beyond our differences by the love of Christ. All right? Now, we also came up with goals and objectives for different ministry areas within the church. Those were the formal outputs. For me, the more important part than the formal output was getting a sense of what type of congregation we long to be. All right? And it's beginning to start setting some direction after a challenging season of life. Let me just share with you some of the things that I am seeing, where I am seeing life coming into this church. And throw up some pictures, would you? By the way, give a hand to Bob Schooley. Bob, wave your hand. Bob has been our official, unofficial photographer at Oak Hill. And he says if you want pictures of yourself, just come and stand in front of him, and he will take your picture. And I said, Bob, can you get some pictures of some people who are older too? And he said, I'll just turn the camera and take a picture of myself. All right, I want to just show you where I'm seeing growth and life happening in this church. I'm seeing it in our youth ministry. I see it when our kids are outside and greeting folks as you come in on Sundays, serving as ushers and greeters. I'm seeing increasing participation in our youth. I'm at 5 minutes already. Lord have mercy. But here's a key one for me. Last year, our youth went on a mission trip after a long hiatus of not having mission trips, all right? And we had 12 of our teenagers go on mission trips last year. This year, we have 18 already who are registered to go on mission trips. That is holy. I'm seeing energy within our youth ministry. I'm particularly loving how some of the older youth are trying to love on the younger youth and make them feel welcome. They're inviting friends, and there's life going on there. I'm seeing life with children's ministry. There are lots of kids down in our Sunday school. A year ago, this church had 8 or 9 kids in Sunday school. Now we have 15 to 20 every week. You know, that's not having 100 kids, guys, but that's more than double what we had just 6 or 9 months ago. That is new life. That is new energy. We've got teachers who are committed and excited, and when you go over into the children's building, you will see energy. You will feel energy in that room. Our preschool is up and going again after being shuttered for a year and a half, and all of our younger classes are full. Holly, You're here in part because this preschool is part of your family's life, and there is energy there. We're still recruiting older kids for next year, but there's life there. In mission is one of the strengths of this congregation. And I'm seeing this church engage in feeding ministries. Marion, you told me this church feeds a lot of people. It does feed a lot of people. But it's also repairing homes. We're building a Habitat house right now. We're resettling refugees. We've started rehosting freeze night shelters. There's a group on Monday nights that is offering showers to people who are homeless living in our community. Showers. And they're helping people get jobs. We have people in this congregation who are helping homeless folks get jobs so they can get out of their homeless situation. And then worship. Throw that worship graph back up there again. All right, we're seeing, it's not dramatic, but I don't know, I was a math major, so I can tell you that's that's significant growth in our worship patterns over this last year. Choir is providing a welcoming place. I don't know if you look at the choir at 11 o'clock, it's grown by 50% over the last 6 to 9 months. As new people are coming in and being part of that ministry. Now, I will let you know that, we lost our contemporary worship experience essentially before COVID, and I'm having some conversations with people this week who are interested in bringing a contemporary worship experience. We're trying to start developing what can be a distinct musical style for 8:30, so that 8:30 is not just a repetition of 11 o'clock, but we're having to work on this because Louise is our music leader here, and we've lost the diversity of music leadership that we had pre-COVID. I'll share with you, one of my concerns is that for many people at Oak Hill, worship is not part of their spiritual practice. Historically, within the Christian faith, worship has been one of the key indicators or a key practice that people engage in for spiritual growth. And for a lot of folks, it's not part of their spiritual practice here. And so I think we just need to make sure that what we're doing in worship is relevant and connecting with people where they are. And then in spiritual formation, show that graph again. We're getting people engaging again. I think one of the reasons this church survived COVID as well as it did is because there were strong Sunday schools. And that provided places for people to plug in. And so we're seeing significant growth. We're having new classes, and so we're trying some new things. And and we've been putting out some church-wide studies. Missy and I have come up with some crazy ideas for church-wide studies, and y'all have bought into it. Thank you. That's holy. I think one of the key things for this church is it's not caught in the conflict right now that's embroiling many other congregations in the United Methodist Church. One of our neighboring congregations down 290 is taking a vote today to disaffiliate, leave the United Methodist Church. And we're not engaged in that conflict. And that's healthy, my friends. I'm going to let you know, though, here's the thing that I think is healthiest in this congregation, and then I'm going to pass it over to Larry. I see people playing and caring for one another. From my perspective as pastor, there is nothing more important than people playing and caring for one another. You see, when we play together, it lowers the boundaries. When we play together, we can tolerate differences from one another. And then when life gets hard, we can love on each other and care for one another. After Vacation Bible School this year, we had a picnic, and we had like 3 million families out in the courtyard on water slides eating Dale's barbecue. All right? We had a picnic in the park this fall. I come on youth some Sundays, and they're hanging out and goofing around and playing games. I see people. Oh, thank you. I was doing my preacher voice. You need my teacher voice. And I see people hanging out after worship. Do I need to go back and do this whole thing again? No. All right? So life is looking up, guys. Life is looking up. We're heading in a healthy direction. Now, I'm going to let you know one of the most healthy things I see is we have a finance committee that is engaging and is looking at not only small picture where we are right now, but also looking at big picture. And Larry Kaiser agreed to be our finance chair this year, and he is awesome. And so Larry's going to share with you about how we are being stewards of God's money at Oak Hill and some trends and patterns that you need to know about. Larry?
Well, good morning, all. Oh, goodness. As Stephen said, we appreciate your being here. Thank you so much for your attendance. We do want to share with you today some financial information concerning the church. Long story short, your finance committee presented a budget last month to church council that church council approved. They showed a planned budget deficit for the year 2023. And this was after the 21 and 22 expenses wound up being higher than the 21 and 22 revenues. So we anticipate winding up at the end of 2023 with a third consecutive budget deficit. Now, most of us have probably had years where our outgo exceeded our income for that year. Or maybe a business that you're affiliated with had that happen. And in most cases, because of savings that we have, we can weather it, get through that, and move on. That's for the occasional rough spot. But there can come a point where, whether it's a home or an entity, if you're in the hole all the time for years and years in a row, eventually it just doesn't work. We are not there at this point in time. Amen. Let me say that again. We are not there. Further, we are not planning to be there. We'll be sharing with you today some steps that we're taking this year to try to get back to a surplus situation year to year. But it's going to take a bit of time to get all the pieces in place. A little background. We ended 2021 with a deficit of $64,357. In 22, that deficit was $151,524, as you see on the slide, down at the bottom there. This budget that we presented to council and that we're currently operating under shows a planned deficit of $45,776. It's still a deficit, but it's not as big. And when we first started working on the budget for this year, when the Finance Committee first started working on the budget, we were looking at something over $200,000 being the deficit for the year. That was not acceptable to anybody in the room. What do? There's really, in my simplistic, perhaps, view, only two ways to deal with situations like that. You either bring in more revenue or you cut expenses. Of course, the third option is to do both, and that accelerates your progress. We could have cut programs as a church, but we chose not to. As Stephen said before, we are trying to grow ministries, not do cutting. So the first temporary adjustment that we'll talk about is apportionment. If you want to put that apportionment slide up, please. Now, apportionment is money that we send to the big church, if you will, to support church-wide missions and programs. In 2022, we sent them just over $106,000. it was decided to advise the big church that we needed to reduce our apportionment payment for the next few years in order to help stabilize our finances here. And to accomplish that, we plan on a temporary reduction in apportionment. Now, that number that is in parentheses is the number that we have in our budget to provide for apportionments for this year, $23,980. We propose paying 25% for 2 years, then going to 50% in 2025, 75% in 2026, and 100% in 2027. Do we like doing that? No. We have always supported the church fully. On Wednesday, this past Wednesday, Stephen received a letter from Andy Smith, the interim superintendent of the Capital District, because we had written to him and said, here's what we need to do as a church. He acknowledged in that letter that there are times when apportionments can't be fully paid. And he thanked us for informing him of our plan to be back to 100% in 2027. So that one expense reduction reduced that pending deficit by about just over $82,000. Instead of sending 106, we're sending 24, roughly. The next slide deals with the church's debt. And you see there it's $1.8 million. We have $1.6 million we owe on the adult education building and the sanctuary expansion here, and then another $212,503 for the children's building. And you'll note the two interest rates that we have, 6% and 5.2%. But our total debt and indebtedness is $1,815,000, as you see on the slide. We made full payments of principal and interest in January and February, but we requested of our lender that as of this month, March, we be allowed to just pay interest for the rest of the year. By doing that, we reduced our expected cash outlay by just over $109,000. Now, those two difficult decisions, apportionment and principal payment reduction, elimination really, allowed us to reduce our projected deficit to the $45,776 we talked about before. It's still a deficit, and nobody is happy with that on finance, or I would suspect on church council. I didn't talk to all the church council members, but I know that I'm sure that's one of those things that they're like, we don't want to be there. But it's not a $200,000 deficit, so it's the best that we could do for this year and for the coming years. Now, you may wonder, are we broke? The next slide shows our current cash reserves. And as you can see, no, we are not broke. And yes, we are indeed staying open. So let's look at our revenue over a 7-year period. You'll see that 2023 is projected to be down a couple of $100,000 from 2017, where it was $1.4 million versus $1.2 million. But that $1.2 million is slightly up from 2022. I understand that numbers, when finance people get up to talk, a lot of times people's eyes kind of roll the back of their head because of numbers, so we're going to keep this pretty light on the numbers. But the next slide talks about the church's net income, and you've seen this before. We were in the black through 2020, and then 2021 we had a bigger deficit last year, and then we're looking for a smaller deficit next year. So the next slide shows our revenue and our net income. Now, you've seen both these numbers on the other slide, but this puts it in a slightly different format. And to me, as I look at those trend lines, as Stephen was talking about with the slide that he had, it looks to me like those things are fairly parallel, not completely, but fairly. But as you have more income, obviously, then the deficit amount can be lower. The next slide, please. Revenue and attendance. I think it's a pretty obvious thing, but the numbers certainly show us that when our attendance goes down, the bottom line, our revenues go down. So one of our challenges in the coming years is how do we increase attendance? How do we keep our programs, grow the programs, and increase attendance so that we can in turn increase our revenues? So that's basically a high-level look at the 2023 church budget. Now, there are one-page summaries of the budget that are available if you'd like. There's even a 4-page detailed budget if you're interested in line by line, more information. Does the temporary fix for this year budget mean that we've got our problems resolved, our challenges are over? No. We need to be in a situation where we can support our programs, grow our programs, and repay the principal that we are suspending, because as you know, when you make a mortgage payment, theoretically the interest ought to go down every month because your principal goes down every month as you're making the payment. If we're paying interest only, we're not getting that benefit of the lower interest rate, so our interest costs are going to be a little bit higher, but a lot less than paying the principal payment as well. So any questions that you all have about the finance side of the house? And then Stephen's going to come up if you have a question about program. Yes, sir.
All right, if I can get y'all to come back. So here's I want to share one thing, and then I want to have you begin asking your questions. This church went through 2 twin crises back to back. It went through a season of conflict, and a lot of people left, okay? And we ended up having $250,000 in annual giving decrease at the end of 2019. Then COVID hit. And so now we are in the process of trying to grow ministries. At the same time, we are facing the financial reality that at the end of 2019, we had a significant drop-off in giving. That makes sense? Okay. And if it doesn't, we'll keep explaining it. All right. What questions now? What questions? Yes, sir. Well, your cousin had a question first, so I'm going to, Curtis, what's your question? Okay, so the question is, part of what Curtis and Joanne? Oh, man, I got to be really careful here. I got your husband's name right. Part of what they give to the church goes to the general fund, and part goes to debt reduction. May I answer this one? Anything you ever designate, we spend as you have designated. That's an integrity issue in the church. So if you continue to give part of your giving to debt reduction, it goes to debt reduction and it will go to the principal. We're going to spend the money based upon how you say. All right? Did I answer your question? Okay. Let me go to the cousin relationship back there, Jennifer, okay?
One is, how is the apportionment determined? Is the apportionment now determined based on 300 attending, or is it still based on 600 attending?
Do you want to ask that?
No,
you don't want to talk apportionments? Okay.
You are the expert on that.
Apportionments are a financial calculation based upon total expenditures, excluding capital funds, and excluding what's called benevolences, so mission-type money, all right? And so it's simply an average of the last 2 years of overall expenses overall operating expenses. So membership numbers have nothing to do with the dollar amount calculated for apportionments.
Okay, so how does this compare to when we had 600 people here? What was our apportionment then as compared to our apportionment now?
I do not have, we can get that information to you, all right, but we don't have it in front of us. Well, it may actually be on the sheet that's going out. It's probably on the sheet somewhere that's going out. But remember, when this church back in 2015, 2012, we were having 600 people in worship, and so the giving was higher, therefore the apportionments would have been higher.
Okay, and the other question I have, what are the restrictions on the restricted funds?
What are restrictions on restricted funds? You want to do that one?
I think Dale probably better off, best to answer that. Dale, where are you at? Oh, there you go. Dale's our treasurer, and he assists in taking care of the day-to-day movement of money and things like that. The question of restricted funds, what does that mean?
So that would be like the endowment, the money that's in the endowment, the $500,000 I think you saw up there. Most of that is in the endowment. Some of it might be other money that's restricted because it was for a certain purpose. So it's restricted for that use only, not to be used in operations. Does that answer your question?
What can the permanent endowment fund be used for? What is the return on it, and what can we use that return?
So there's an endowment committee that meets, that decides what that interest and earnings is used for. Or you come to that endowment committee and make a request for funds. Is that the answer to the question?
We will follow up with anything that we can. Miss Jennifer, you had a question, and then Kathy has a question over there, and then you, Jack, and Lee. Kathy was first?
I'm first. My question is, because what I hear you say, this is really, really, really dependent on what I call seats and pews. And so what are our plans to really make that happen? We've got all these new apartments over here that I don't see any kind, I mean, I haven't been here for a while, I will admit that, but I don't see any outreach over there. What I see in outreach is us serving others all over the community, which I'm thrilled to be part of and thrilled to be happening. But what is our plan to get people, not necessarily as members, but people into this church and engaged in our activities? These apartments over here are kind of high dollar. Most of them are high dollar apartments. And if we're worried about money, we should be talking to those folks. And I don't really think that, I don't know that we are. And like I said, I've been out a bunch, but I don't know that we're talking to these folks and all of these millions of new houses that are going on over here. I live in a subdivision that's exploding, as do most of us. And I don't see us reaching out to new people. What I see is us serving people that we care about. So, do we have a plan? Vicki probably has the answer to that.
Let me do a basic response, okay? So the question is, what are we doing to help grow the congregation? And my friends, I believe that we grow a congregation by strengthening and growing the ministries of the church and people being invited to come in and being part of that and being welcomed and being loved on, all right? Now, do we have an organized plan at this point to go out to a particular place? No. What we do have is areas of ministry that we are working on to strengthen them. Some of it is going out, Kathy, and serving. It's strengthening our youth and children's ministries so that teenagers want to come and them being able to invite their friends. It is having children's ministries that are vibrant, and so kids bring their parents. I have one parent who sent me an email this week. She was so sorry she couldn't be here, and her daughter is furious at her because her 7-year-old daughter so loves being part of Sunday school. and they are going to a wedding in Lubbock and cannot be here. It is those types of things that are going to strengthen this church, and this church will grow as it has strong ministries, and as this congregation both invites people to come in and welcomes and loves on people and helps them connect.
Follow-up. So how do all these people around us know what we're doing? Just word of mouth of us? I don't know anybody that lives over there. I don't know anybody. I know a bunch of people that live over there, but they're churched. But I really don't know any people that live over there. And when you're talking about our ministries, you just said earlier that our ministries are fully engaged in feeding homeless people. And I love that. I've done that for years in many communities. But those people are mostly on the other side of town. And those individuals do not have what you're wanting from them. And I would love to see this church full of homeless folks that are living in the gullies down here and in the gullies over there. But you don't see them in here. So I really think we're going to have to do a more distinct plan of getting out into the community with some kind of activity, putting doorknobs, putting things on. I get mailers every day from a new church from down by where I live. Trash, you know, and I think most people do that with those kind of things.
So, Kathy, what I can share with you is from my experience of helping churches grow, is it happens by strengthening the ministries and the church being intentional about inviting. Do we need PR campaigns and things of that? Yes. But right now, we've been focusing on blocking and tackling and getting the basics of ministries up and going again.
And I've got some experience in church development and
Cool.
growth also.
Let's be part of it. All right.
So-
I'm going to move us on. Jennifer had the next one, and then Jack and Lee. Well, your husband left, so it's just Lee.
Is this already?
It's on.
So my question goes with Curtis. So he said that he earmarks money for debt reduction, so a specific purpose. So for the year 2023, is his money going to go just towards the interest payments, or is there a way of it being applied to the principal?
Dale, you want? No, I'm gonna give a response then. If he has said it's going for debt reduction, it's going for debt reduction, because we operate on integrity within the church. And if someone says, this is how I want my gift to go, if we accept that gift in the church, we are morally, legally, ethically bound to spend it. So if they say debt reduction, integrity, we will spend it on debt reduction. So we will have some principal reduction this year, but we're not paying principal out of our general budget.
Okay, and then also debt reduction is an example of a restricted fund, right?
Debt reduction would be an example of its restricted sum.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
Lee?
Our group was just curious if there are any numbers on the comparison between giving of people that attend mostly online, virtual attendance, and people who are attending sitting in the seats.
I am not aware of those. I think that would be an interesting thing to look at. Yes.
Yeah, so sorry we can't answer that one on you. At this point, there's maybe some things, Lee, that we say we need to do a deeper dive into it. Okay? Doug. And then we'll come back over to you, all right?
Doug? Where you at, Doug?
My question is, I didn't see anything up there on the board. What are our apportionments go to the diocese?
Do you want to take that or me?
No, sir. That is
You were supposed to be taking all the finance questions.
But
So
let
what
the
do
church
apportionments what do apportionments go to? That is an awesome question. Let me take the word apart, all right? Apportionment means a portion of the larger church's expenses, all right? So the larger denomination has expenses. We're part of what's called the Rio, Texas Annual Conference, and that is part of the General United Methodist Churches. So we have some, Doug, Administrative cost. We have these things called district superintendents. That's my boss. We have a bishop. That's the district superintendent's boss. They receive salaries. We also have different ministries that, such as anybody part of ERT, early response teams. All right, those are people who go out after there's been a disaster. And so there is missional work that goes on within this part of the country. We have people who can come in and help us strengthen our ministries. So it is both administrative work and it is both direct missional work. Where it really gets into direct missional work is it's within the global United Methodist Church. And one of the ways that we as a local church are engaged in ministry around the world is through apportionments. And so the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, through the United Methodist Committee on Relief, we are already in mission and ministry there, all right, serving people. In Ukraine, in Mexico, we are engaged in mission. So here's my basic breakdown of it. I consider that 50% of apportionments, this is Stephen math, 50% of apportionments is direct mission work either in our local community or around the world. And about another 50% of it is the expenses to operate a worldwide denomination. And so we pay a portion of that whole expense. Did that answer your question? All right. Craig.
Yeah, this is a budget question. The revenue side shows a $10,000 contribution from the preschool. I gather goes towards maintenance. The church maintains the building they use. Is it self-supporting otherwise, the school, or is there something is part of the budget have something to do with the preschool?
Actually, the preschool, we submitted a separate preschool budget to the church council that is not part of this that you saw on the screen, Craig. The preschool has had a period of time where there were some deficits. They've had some grant money, though, that has helped replace that. They received a grant this year that with the use of that grant, they project a surplus as opposed to a deficit for the year 2023. So that really is a separate budget as it's set up at the current time. So it's not reflected in these numbers.
And if there's a deficit, does the church pick up the deficit amount?
Historically, I think that has happened, and that has been repaid with some grant monies that have come in at a later point in time. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve.
Jessica. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of question and addition to this. As a
No, but before you ask your question, what brought you to Oak Hill? You're new here.
So this is actually our second time being here. We first came here when I was pregnant with my first daughter, who is now 6. And we felt a little out of place as a young pregnant couple. I'm not going to lie. We felt like the youngins and the only youngins of the group. But our faith brought us, actually my 6-year-old is what brought us back. She asked about Sunday school. She's like, I want to learn about God. And I emailed, and Jen got back to me that day, and we showed up. And then I found about the adult Sunday school, and I've been super passionate about that. And that's what's been bringing us back. And that's what I wanted to say is the programs. Walter and I were saying, I'm really happy with your avoidance to get rid of programs, because that's what's brought us and that's what's keeping us. And that's why I tell other friends about, hey, there's a great Sunday school. And yeah, if you just want to come for a break to not have a kid scream at you, it's really great. But it's also gotten me more involved in other programs, like going to serve. I haven't had the opportunity to go and serve dinner yet, but I know that my 6-year-old is interested in it. So we're going to go do that because it gives me an opportunity to show her how to serve the community, because I'm overwhelmed with a 6 and a 3-year-old, and I know I'm the minority of kids because I have some great friends here who have multiples or more than I do. And so the church has really been a guide for me on how to get involved in my community in a safe way to bring my children. Also, we live 4 minutes from here, and it's right by the grocery store. So that's been a big draw for us. 'Cause we
Okay,
could
so
hit-
Jessica, besides doing a great promo on what's going to strengthen this church and help it thrive, did you have a question?
Well, that is part of it, is again to say the programs have been great. What are some ways, like I know Carla is doing a fantastic job, and I'm really excited to hear that we are going to be doing Vacation Bible School in the evening in July, which is very different than the normal programs. So are there some ways, and I'll try and help Carla as much as I can, I know she's got a lot on her plate, but what are some ways that we can bring in, and I apologize, I forgot your
Kathy.
name. But Kathy had said, we don't necessarily, I mean, don't get me wrong, I want to bring more members into this church, but what are some ways we can bring people who will have funds, like to pay for Vacation Bible School is something that I know a lot of parents are, I've already looked at 4 different Vacation Bible Schools to send my kids to because I know this summer I'm going to have them. And so what are some out-of-the-box marketing that we can do, but then also hopefully gain members out of it? But I think the draw needs to be, how do we promote our programs and then hopefully get the membership? Like, people are going to want to stay once they're here. This community has been fantastic to our family, and I know other families will say the same. So again, growing those ministries, what are other out-of-the-box ways that we can think to do that, to get them here, and then again.
Okay, this is gonna sound really strange. I'm not gonna give you an. So the question is, what are some out-of-the-box ways we can get people engaged in ministry here? Well, Vicky Matustik, she is out of the box, yes. But here. All right, this. Yes, Nancy. Yeah, all right, the listening room. We've got a group that started concerts here on Friday nights once a month. That's out of the box and bringing people here. And then, having publicity. I'm going to give you a not out of the box way first, and then I can give you a couple of out of the box. Hi, my name's Stephen Sanders. What's your name?
My name is Sue Searle.
Sue, I am so glad. I am so glad that you were here today. Would you like to come to a Sunday school class? Are you connected with Oak Hill very much?
I've been coming for 2 or 3 months.
You've been coming for 2 to 3 months. Would you like to come to a Sunday school class with me?
Well, I have visited 3 already, and I have felt very, very welcome.
Well, she goes to my class. Would you be willing? Would you be willing to come with me next week? Could I meet you out in the courtyard right after 8:30 worship, about 9:35, and I'll get you a cup of coffee and take you?
Great.
That's going to be the most effective way. That is the most effective way, is personal invitation. That is what's going to get people engaged, all right? You want to say something? Say it, whisper in my ear.
I came here initially because of convenience, and I'm a member of First Baptist downtown, and it's just too much to get there anymore. So I came for that, and also because I've known Louise since she was a child, and I know her music.
Whoa!
I won't say how many years that is. But anyway, after I got here, there were so many more reasons to come because of the greatness of the friendships in this church. People are warm and inviting, and that's why I'm still coming back.
Are y'all getting this? No. Oh, man, I was trying to get you to whisper in my ear. Give it in one sentence.
The fellowship that's been offered to me.
It's on mute. Now give it in 2 sentences.
The fellowship that's been offered to me as a visitor has been outstanding, and that's why I keep coming back, and will probably join eventually.
And you came because it's close and because you know Louise and you
Yes.
trust her.
Yes.
All right. We've got time for one more question, and then we're going to pray. So yes, Lisa. Oh, Cole has a question.
Just as a response to the last question about how ministries are reaching out, I'm kind of the hidden help in a lot of that. I was hired not last October, but the October before, and a lot of this progress and quality and things like that is part of the technical ministry's drive to not just reach out to other people, but see that this is something that we all are really deeply devoted to, right? My job is to help represent all of your all of this energy that Oak Hill has and really make it presentable to the outside audience. And we're looking towards expanding social media presence and things like that, especially since COVID. It's been a great opportunity to be able to reach out to people online. So we're looking to keep doing that.
So Jessica, the personal invite, we've got invite cards for Easter and Holy Week. They're out in the foyer, forwarding Facebook post. It's the personal invite that's, yeah, some people are going to find it because of the sign. We're hidden, guys, but we're not as hidden before they took down the forest. All right, Lisa, last one, and then we need to close off because we have worship at 11.
I'd just like to comment that we came here from a much larger church, and yeah, we live closer, so yes, it was convenience, but it was also because they weren't supporting Sunday morning classes. And we are both cradle Methodists, I guess, but we were looking for that. So that's one thing. We came because of that. We stayed because of the warmth of people like Alice, Vicki, Marilyn, and Joanne, Patty. People who made us feel part of the ministry. So, you know, yeah, you've got to reach out to people. We need to put those flyers on those apartment complex doors somehow, or on the main area of it. Because, you know, we were actively looking, but I don't think a lot of people sometimes do. They just get dormant about church, I guess.
All right.
Anyway.
Guys, thank you. I appreciate the spirit in this room. So, summary. We went through a hard time, but we're coming out of it. And this church is on a growth path. We had a bunch of people leave, and that affected our financial situation. You've got a finance committee, though, who is not going to let this lie. All right? And so we've taken 2 key steps this year of reducing apportionments, our contribution to the mission of the larger denomination, and going to interest only for a period of time. That allows us to be spending the money on mission and ministry. And I believe that's what's going to help this church continue to grow. Because when we engage in ministries, children, youth, teenagers, parents, preschool, Sunday school, Chuck every week gives me a count on the number of people. You get to count all these people in your class this week, Chuck. All right? That's what's going to engage people. And the money's going to take care of itself. All right? The money's going to take care of itself as we as people of faith are generous. We're not asking people to come here to pay our bills. We're going to pay the bills. We're asking people to come to this church because it's going to change people's lives. All right? Throw up the mission statement, would you? If anything we are doing is not supporting that mission statement that says Q&A, if anything we are doing is not supporting that mission statement, we need to stop doing it. Go to the vision statement. If anything we are doing is not helping us live into that vision statement, we stop doing it. Because we have said as a church, that's who we're going to be. All right? So, I'm going to finish this up. We're going to close in prayer. I'm going to let you know my wife and I tithe. Mary and I give 10% of our income to Oak Hill every year. She also works for a nonprofit. We give an additional amount to the nonprofit for which we work. That is a spiritual practice for us. We give 10% of our income. Your other pastors give 10% of their income. They tithe. There are some incredibly generous people in this church. All right? If you are not at a point where you are tithing, I understand. But I do invite you to evaluate where you are. And if you're at a point where you are able to be increasing your giving by even 1% or 2%, I invite you to prayerfully consider that. So my wife and I are going to turn in a commitment card that says we're going to give 10% of our income to Oak Hill. That's a spiritual practice for us. I'm simply inviting you to consider where God's calling you at this time. Because we are taking steps to make sure that this church is vibrant for the next 5 generations of people. All right? This church has been in existence for over 40 years. we're making plans for another 40. Okay? Now, I invite you to stand, and if you are willing, hold on to someone's hand. If you don't want to hold on to your hand, just look at them and say, I don't want your cooties. Let's pray. Would you grab John's hand, please? Bob, there you go. Gracious and eternal God, you have called us into community. You have called us into life with you and with one another, and you have brought this church into existence, and we are not alone here. And you seek to transform lives and make us into the community of faith where people in apartments across the street and folks living in Dripping Springs and Driftwood and Buda know that they are loved by you and know that they are loved by a community and can find places to be in mission and ministry in this world. Wrap us together and hold us in your arms of grace. Help us to lean on one another that we might live as the community you have called us to be and to be a beacon of light in this world. We lift our prayers through Christ's most holy name, and all God's people say, Amen. All right, we're going to have worship here in 8 minutes, and then we're having a potluck lunch. Invite you to stick around for that.